This is the air cleaner side, so once you just pull it off, it's just 2 bolts, and then it looks like somebody already replaced the air filter recently for me. So I guess we're just going to have to reassemble this and leave it off to the side until we're done. Now we got to remove this other side, which is basically just the vacuum expansion chamber. It doesn't really do anything. So we got to get this off, and then we can get the carburetors out of the valley. Alright, now on this side, we're going to want to unscrew this to remove the choke, and then on the other side, we're going to want to unscrew the 2 bolts that hold on the throttle cables and take those off as well as a unit. Then you just undo this other hose clamp over here, that's very similar one on the other side, and then the carburetors, you disconnect the fuel line, then the carburetors more or less just pull out. So you want to take these fuel lines off, there's one on each side, and you want to undo this screw on each side. And now comes the fun part. There's not really an easy way of doing this other than just kind of wobbling it back and forth until you get the carburetors out of the valley. Now, there's what the valley looks like without the carburetors in. These guys, you want to loosen these outside bolts and pull the bolt out, and then this up here, it basically just slides on. So you can see it's got a cutout. And you're supposed to have O-rings back here, but the last guy seems to have RTV'd it. So I'll probably have to RTV it again to get it to seal properly. But the hardest part is getting all this back in correctly. But now that the carbs are out on the bench, we can calmly rebuild them. So here are the carbs on the bench. These are the 2 kits. You need KL18-2596 kits. These kits are nice. They're only about $20 a piece, but they include all your new hardware, all of your new jets and pilot and everything. So they're really, really nice in that sense, and they're identical. However, these 2 carburetors are not identical, as we're going to find out here in a second. They have different size main jets, and so you need to make sure each kit comes with both main jets. You just need to make sure you put in the correct main jet when you rebuild it. As you can see, this is probably one of the most complete kits I've ever seen for any bike, and I've done this a couple times. I mean, it even comes with all the new screws for the top side and everything. So we're actually going to start from up here. So here's our, first we're going to start with the needle. So this guy goes in first. And it's the same on both sides, you can see. So this actually drops down in here like that. And then so the needle has this little donut on it. And it's not adjustable, it's just a new needle. There you go. Clicks right in. And so now we can just drop that down. Drop it down in there, and we can set this aside. And you can see this has got a little lip right here, and the little lip lines up like that. And you want to make sure that this lip is perfectly seated before you reassemble this. So, and in reassembling the top end, we're going to use our new screws, but we're only going to use 2 of them for now, because we still have to do the other one. And I always like to do the carburetors one at a time. That way I don't forget anything. If I have any leftover parts, I know I can, you know, I know where they go. So first thing we got to do is we got to take off this linkage right here to give us access to this carb bowl. So this is nice and clean. So it's quite possible that this carburetor was, this bike is just having tuning issues more than necessarily dirty carburetors, because the gas that came out of here is pretty clean as well. But since we're here, we're going to replace everything anyway. Yeah, that pilot jet's pretty gummed up. And this is a 40 pilot, and this is a 40 pilot. So it's always a good idea to, even when you buy a kit for a specific bike, it's always a good idea to just double check real quick. So I made a mistake earlier, which is why these are back out here. So the forward-facing cylinder, the one with the throttle on it, this one gets the larger main jet. It's 125, and you want to set the turns to 1 1/4 on the fuel screw. The rear one gets the 122.5 main jet, and you want to set the fuel to 2.5. So you're going to need a hammer to pull this all out. The other problem is that at some point somebody tried to synchronize these and got them so far out that I wasn't able to do it on the bike. So now we're going to set everything back to normal here on the bench. So the first thing you want to do is you want to use this idle adjuster, and if I screw in the idle adjuster, if you pop this open it makes it easier. If I screw in the idle adjuster, you can see right here this throttle blade is opening. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to close it up basically all the way until there's nothing really showing. And then down here is the synchronization screw, and what we want is we want this guy to be fully closed as well, and I've already adjusted it somewhat. But if we take this adjustment screw right here, this is your sync screw. If we screw this in a little bit, you'll see that, what you'll see is that this one starts developing a little sliver of light here. And so what you want is you want these two to be basically the same. So you want just a little tiny gap here and a little tiny gap on the other one, which is just sets the idle, and we can always reduce the idle. But this screw right here is what actually adjusts the two against each other. So it's very important to get it pretty close here on the bench, and then we'll move and do a vacuum sync on the bike. So now that we got the carbs rebuilt, the next step is synchronization. A lot of people on the internet will tell you about this tool. I've had it for a number of years. Motion Pro makes a lot of quality products. I use a lot of their products, but this thing right here is garbage. It will work the very first time you use it, and then the fluid will either evaporate or whatever. It's really garbage. What I recommend is going to Harbor Freight and picking up 2 of these. Now, they're $15 each for the kit. They come in this nice little box, and they call it Fuel Pump and Vacuum Gauge Tester. It's part number 93547. And you can buy 4 of them. I'm just doing a 2-cylinder bike right now, so I'm going to just use 2, and I only bought 2. So what you get is this giant ass gauge, and then you get this adapter from 1/4 down to this little hose. And this is just vacuum tubing that will fit on the nipple on the carb spacer. So what we're actually going to do is we're actually going to hook both of these up to 1 cylinder first to make sure that they are in sync against each other. And then once we know the difference in between the two, we can hook them up to the 2 cylinders and synchronize the carbs. And I'll show you guys how to do that in a minute. So, synchronize carbs, first thing you gotta do is you gotta find this. There's gonna be a vacuum line running off one of the carburetors. What we're gonna do is we're gonna unplug it. This is just a vent that goes down there, but the important part is we can put this on here, and this is our little T. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna use this to look at our 2 gauges and compare them against each other. So a couple of notes whenever you do this. First of all, I have the fan going, both garage doors are open. You want a nice well ventilated area. You want airflow going past the bike to keep it cool. So I'm actually going to move this fan a little bit so that it's blowing right across the bike. And you really need to let the bike warm up before you start the actual sync process. But we can check our these guys against each other even with the choke on, because it's just measuring vacuum. So here they are hooked up to the same vacuum, and you can see this one is just a little bit higher than the other one, but they're so close it doesn't matter. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to well, this one's creeping up a little bit, but what we're going to do is we're going to hook this one into the back, this one into the front, and synchronize them against each other at about 2,000 RPM. So you can see here at stock, this one is about 5 psi, drawing about 5 psi more vacuum than this guy. So we're going to turn the adjustment screw that's down underneath the carbs about half a turn, give it a little bit of rev. So we want to see, there's about 1,500 RPM. RPM, and you can see that they're not quite in sync. So we're going to actually synchronize on this bike. You can synchronize at idle and then go from there.